Welcome to Process Mapping Support. Before we begin, I wanted to introduce Libria. Who are we? Libria are an independent consultancy that provide process mapping consultancy, training and facilitated workshops. We have clients ranging from defense, manufacturing, education, IT companies, software vendors and small local businesses. So the agenda for this session. What is process? Why do we do it? The hierarchy of process. What should you map? Have you identified your value chain? What are your critical processes? How much is enough? Are there bottlenecks in the process? Do you have any single points of failures? And identifying your problem areas. So what is a process? A process is a set of interrelated or interacting activities that turn inputs into outputs. And this is a definition from the International Organization for Standards, or ISO, and is part of the Quality Standard 9001/2015. A process is also measurable, or it has unambiguous outcomes. It should also have an owner, and each task within a process may be supported by checklists, scripts, templates, or systems. Why do people capture process? Well, there are many reasons for capturing process, and here's just a few of them. So, provide clarity to staff and customers. Identify who is responsible for a task. Identify the output of the process, and to identify who receives the output of that process. To enable the transfer of knowledge, and to measure how good or indeed bad a process is. And there's nothing wrong with a bad process providing it's consistently bad. That way, if you make a change, if it gets better, you stick with it. If it gets worse, you roll back. We can also understand if you have bottlenecks or single points of failure within a process. And we can understand how they can improve. What is the purpose of process? It's really simple. It's to achieve the same desired outcome every time. And that's regardless of who does it and regardless of the load that is put under. What is the value of process? Here's a sweeping statement. Organizations get no value from all the activities that are conducted on a daily basis. That statement I'm just going to leave hanging for a minute. Organizations get no value from activities. Activities attract cost. They're the necessary catalyst to produce an output, or what we call the deliverable. It's these deliverables that add the value. The fact that I spent 4 hours creating a time and attendance spreadsheet, it's not the 4 hours that you value, it's the time and attendance spreadsheet itself that's of value. Thinking about the hierarchy of process now, and rather than showing it as a pyramid, I'm showing it as a series of steps. And right at the top, we have our policies. These are the strategic directives set by the senior leadership team, which set out the organization's intent. And these should be fairly small documents. They're often referred to as the thou shall documents. They won't or should not be providing any guidance on how we fulfill those directions. These are not to be confused with mission statements. So a mission statement would be, we aim to be #1 in the world for creating widgets. So a policy is that thou shall, we shall adhere to all of the laws of the land and current government directives, such as health and safety legislation or the GDPR, or General Data Protection Regulation. Processes. Processes are a set of activities that transform the inputs to outputs. They operate at a high level across many functions and departments, and they describe what is being done, not how it's executed. Procedures. These sit below processes and they outline how to perform and maintain control of the processes, and they will support the process in further detail. They may well have guidance notes or instructions within them. At the lowest level, we have our work instructions or standard operating procedures. These describe the step-by-step instructions on exactly how to perform a task, and they will be a much more detailed portion of a procedure. They may well have screenshots or detailed buttons to push to achieve the required outcome. Thinking about the value chain of our process, what it is we get paid to do. In this first example, we'll look at human resources. Now, this is not an exhaustive list, but what is the purpose of resourcing or human resources? It is to help fulfill a vacancy, to select candidates, to onboard new starters, to manage absence, and that might be annual leave, it might be maternity, it might be paternity, it might be compassionate leave. We should have a grievance process and in turn a disciplinary process, and along with the final steps of exit from employment. Looking at manufacturing now. So manufacturing will have an engineering element to it, which might involve preliminary design, detailed design, verification and validation, and testing. Quality control, inspection, change management, materials management, and service and support. All of these are part of the value chain. A failure in any one of these will result in either substandard product or no product being shipped to the customer. If we look at customer journey mapping, slightly different to process mapping, but there's no reason why you can't use some of the same process maps along the way. And so if we think about what the customer is experiencing, so if we think about the sales environment of how we manage inquiries, how we fulfill orders, how we deliver that product or technical service to the customer, service visits, how do we manage the finance with the customer, how do we invoice them, how do we perform credit control. Critical processes. There is much debate over the term critical within the quality management arena, and there's no official definition from ISO of what it means. Depending on the industry you work in, a critical process will have different meanings. To be clear, we use the term to identify processes that will prevent your organization from fulfilling its value chain. And where are your critical processes? So if we think about a typical critical process, these may include order processing, of actually taking the orders from the customer, and the provision of the product or service, or delivering the goods. Now, one thing that we should not be confusing critical processes with is special processes. And these are defined in heavily regulated industries such as medical and pharmaceutical, and they may include heat treatment or sterilization, or sometimes a process that's performed to a product which becomes invisible when it's included in a greater finished article. So, how much is enough? This comes back to the definition of what a process is. And the purpose of a process is to describe what needs to be done and not how to do it. For something to be considered a process, we should consider that the person conducting the process is competent to perform it. For example, a process step may identify test component. In the process, we would assume they know how to conduct a test, but they may need to link to a procedure and guidance material which would identify the different protocols depending on the part being tested. Work instructions may be linked to from a process to provide further information. Bottlenecks and single points of failure. Before you can even consider identifying your bottlenecks and single points of failures, you must be able to clearly see your process as it currently stands, or as we term it, your as-is process. You cannot look to fix anything until you know where you are. So, bottlenecks and single point of failures. What's the difference? So, bottlenecks and single points of failure. A bottleneck is a point in a process that's constrained by the quantity that you can put through it. An example of this is steps such as inspection. If you produce 100 units per hour, but you can only inspect 80, this is a constricted point. To overcome this, you may have to draft in additional inspectors to cope with demand, or increase to overtime to allow that demand to be significantly inspected. A single point of failure is where you only have one expert in the process, and if they're away, work just simply doesn't get done. A good example of this is an authorization task where only one person can sign off an item such as an order, a leave request, or an invoice. Once you've identified your processes, you can then start to focus on your problem areas. And it might also be useful to start to employ tools such as root cause analysis, cause and effect diagrams, risk registers, and Pareto analysis. You could use a whole host of other problem-solving tools, but quite often it will come from a process failure or a problem within the process. So where should you start on your process mapping journey? Should you be looking at mapping a cross-functional process which affects every area of the business so you can get exposed to that? Should you be looking at mapping areas which have the most number of people involved? Or should it be the most significant business value? This is a very difficult question to answer, and if you've not started your mapping before, we would strongly recommend you start with a straightforward, simple process which has the least number of players involved to show maximum benefit, so people want to have their processes mapped rather than having change or process done to them. So pick something that everybody can recognize and associate with. We've not spoken about tools in this webinar, and there are a whole host of tools out there, but we use 3 commonly. And this is an excerpt from Process Bliss, and it's part of a new function they're adding into the software, which I think displays things quite nicely. They've identified an organization functionally, and they've also listed the number of processes that they're responsible for. They can also see the number of those processes, whilst they have been identified, may not have been created yet. And HR is a really good example. So we're showing that HR have 5 processes, however only 4 of the 5 have been created. If we look at HR in more detail, we can see actually we have these 5 processes: appraisal, leavers, onboarding and recruitment, that have all been mapped. However, disciplinary, while it exists, is asking for steps to be added because there's no defined process for it. They're also showing the last time that the process was used and also the last time the process was modified. There are many different ways you can do it, but having a working list and a dashboard you can work towards is a really good idea, so you can start seeing where you are on your mapping journey. So, where are your next steps? By now you'll have an understanding of what a process is, and actually importantly what it isn't, and you should have an indication of where to start. We are offering free process consultations for the next few weeks, and for your free 1-hour consultation, Labria will talk you through your processes, where you are and where you should focus your energies. If you want to go up to the next level, then we can actually map one of your basic processes and give you a copy of that back in a PDF format so you can start on your process journey. If you want to go further, we can look at creating an end-to-end process, which can then be shared in one of the online platforms that we use. And an online end-to-end process could be something like recruitment, from a vacant position through to a new employee. So, sources of further information. We'd be more than happy to help you with your mapping projects. You can get in contact with us via victoria.hormigo@labria.co.uk, or myself, Paul Elson Vining, so paul.elson-vining@labria.co.uk, or telephone us on +44 118 38 00 856 or www.labria.co.uk. We also do have a regular programme of events, which is available from our website on the events page, www.labria.co.uk/events. Thank you for your time.